Ashtotara Satashi Shrimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Premsakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Arigor Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Sharma Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today we're continuing with the reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, written by His Holiness Satsrup Das Goswami. We're on volume 3, and today we'll touch upon the last chapter of the volume. Probably by next week, we'll be able to start volume 4. So far, in this volume, 1967, Prabhupada began with his trip to San Francisco, where he established the new Jagannath Puri temple. He then returned to New York. He suffered a stroke, heart attack, and needed to recover in India. You can turn this off, please. Thank you. So he returned to India along with one disciple, Kirtanananda, and on Janmashtami, he awarded Kirtanananda the ashram of sannyas. At the same time, another disciple arrived, Achyutananda, and he joined them. Kirtanananda then left, and Prabhupada had given him an assignment to go to London and begin a temple there. Unfortunately, Kirtanananda had no intention of following that instruction. He was supposed to meet Rai Ram there. Rai Ram was supposed to come from Boston, and they were supposed to together establish the first temple in Europe. But Kirtananda did not stop in London. Instead, he went back to America. And we'll hear today what happened. Along with Achyutananda, soon afterwards, a newly initiated devotee, you can remember that in San Francisco, although Prabhupada was still ill, he was staying at Stinson Beach. At the very end, he had the devotees come who were waiting for initiation, and one by one, he initiated those devotees there at Stinson Beach. So one of those newly initiated devotees, his name was Ramanuja Das. He still had big hairs, long black beard, and somehow or other, he decided that he wanted to come and join Prabhupada in Vrindavan. So he showed up one day. So we hear about that today. Now what Prabhupada did when he was in Vrindavan, Prabhupada had one godbrother, Swami Ban Maharaj, and his project is across the street from our present temple here. He wanted it to be a Vaishnava institute for getting degrees, but because very few students were interested in Oriental philosophy and Vaishnava theology, what he did was he teamed up with the Agra University, and Agra University turned it into a degree college. Degree college means the students study commerce, law, engineering, and use that to make careers for themselves. So the original idea of the Oriental Institute became shadowed by the now Agra University, and you can see across the street, we saw last week the signs, Ban Maharaj Law College, Ban Maharaj College of Engineering, Ban Maharaj College of Management, and way back in a field, you'll find a plaque, Vaishnav Theological University with no building behind it. And way back in another corner, far left, you'll find a murti of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So Prabhupada, of course, he wanted to take this beautiful opportunity to combine with Ban Maharaj so that his students, foreign students, could come here to study Sanskrit and Vaishnava theology. But the problem was that when Prabhupada brought his two students, Achyutananda and Kirtananda, to the college, they immediately surmised that there was no Vaishnava training going on whatsoever. They wanted to learn Sanskrit, but the students were just giggly girls and boys with thin mustaches that we heard about last week. So Prabhupada is now writing to Rupanuga. On the whole, Srila Prabhupada wrote to Rupanuga in New York, the American boys who come here become first depressed. So I do not know how far our American house in Vrindavan will be successful. His boys were not particularly studious or austere. Besides, both Kirtananda Swami and Chutananda had developed a definite dislike for the rector of the Institute of Oriental Philosophy. The rector, of course, was Prabhupada's godbrother, Ban Maharaj. And Srila Prabhupada obviously had reservations about the place. You can go and study there, Prabhupada told them, but don't live there. Live at the Radha Damodar temple and go. You can get a bicycle and go there. So meanwhile, Kirtananda and Achyutananda, because every time Prabhupada wrote a letter to the different temples, they would include their own little footnotes at the end of the letter. And Achyutananda was telling the devotees, forget about it. The girls shouldn't come, and the boys, you'll never be able to live here in such austerity. The prasadam is horrible. The living conditions are horrible. So don't bother coming here to study Sanskrit. So they had already made their opinion about the place, and Prabhupada also realized that it just wasn't going to work. Gradually, the idea of immediately acquiring an American house in Vrindavan began to dwindle. Prabhupada needed his own place for his disciples, and that would take time. So in the meantime, this is 1967, Srila Prabhupada was in his 2 rooms at the Radha Damodar temple. He was simultaneously trying to negotiate with the Goswamis, and there were different parties of the Goswamis, to purchase some of the land of the temple to build his American house. But they weren't interested. So Prabhupada, because his headquarters, the hub of the spiritual universe, was the Radha Damodar temple, eventually Prabhupada kept those 2 rooms. The 2 rooms are still with Srila Prabhupada and ISKCON. And by 1970 and then 1972, we have a picture here when Prabhupada called the devotees and had the first Kartik festival at the Radha Damodar temple. This is before he was offered the land by Gita Devi Saraf that our temple is now built on. With regular medication, massages, rest, and the heat of Vrindavan, Prabhupada felt himself recovering. By mid-September, he declared himself 90% fit to return to the United States. He predicted that he would be back there by the end of October. Health-wise, Prabhupada was improving, but Prabhupada had 2 very important projects that he had to complete before he was to attempt to go back to America. B.R. Sridhar Maharaj, Prabhupada's godbrother, whose ashram was in Navadvip, West Bengal, wrote to invite Prabhupada to spend the month of Kartik with him at the ashram and join him for his Vyasa Puja celebrations. Srila Prabhupada liked the idea of going to the holy land of Navadvip, where Lord Chaitanya had spent his early years, and seeing his godbrother. He also wanted to visit Delhi again and inquire about printing his books. So Prabhupada's original plan was just to stay in Vrindavan, take Ayurvedic medicine, soak in as much sun as possible. It's still hot here in September. And then prepare to go back by October to America. But now with this invitation to Navadvip, there was going to be a change of plans. That's because one of the two things keeping Prabhupada from returning to America was that in the last 2 years, since 1965 to 1967, he hadn't printed a single book. But in 1962, 63, 64, he had printed 3 volumes. So he wanted to get his Gita Upanishad printed, and he wanted to get the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam printed. And he was communicating regularly with Brahmananda whether Macmillan was actually going to print or not. At the same time, he was communicating with the Dalmia, Mr. Dalmia, and his secretary, Mr. Heet Sharan, to see if they would sponsor another volume, because they had already sponsored 1 volume, and with Hanuman Prasad Podar of the Gita Press. So Prabhupada was very active, trying to get his books printed. He didn't want to go back empty-handed. Swamiji Achyutananda asked, "When you go to Navadvip, am I supposed to stay here in Vrindavan and study? Don't you want to see the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya?" Prabhupada asked. Achyutananda did, and Prabhupada, Kirtananda Swami, and Achyutananda left Vrindavan together and returned to the Chippiwada temple in Delhi. For Prabhupada's 2 disciples, life at the Chippiwada temple was hard. Delhi was blazing hot and lacked the charm of Vrindavan. There was water for only 2 hours a day, early in the morning, and that only a slow trickle. They would fill 2 clay jugs for Prabhupada's room and several buckets for his bath and their own, and then there would be no more water for the rest of the day. A mongoose ran freely through the building. So there were many impressions that Achyutananda had when he had to stay with Srila Prabhupada at Chippiwada. He describes those in his book, Blazing Sadhus. Just around the corner, there was child prostitution going on, and Achyutananda was completely aghast by this. What was going on? And he came to ask Prabhupada, and Prabhupada sadly said yes. And Achyutananda said, "Who's doing it?" He said, "The parents are doing it." So he was just culture shocked by the things that he was seeing in Delhi, along with the heat and the mongoose and the lack of water. It was very austere for them in Delhi at that time. "Do they eat snakes?" Achyutananda asked. "They eat snakes," said Srila Prabhupada. "They eat garbage. They eat anything." Prabhupada, who regarded the heat, the lack of water, and even the mongoose as normal, was undisturbed. Several young Indian musicians in the adjacent room regularly played cinema music on their electric organ, bongo drums, and electric guitars, rehearsing for a dance. Prabhupada tolerated it. So what happened was, the temple, the beautiful temple where Prabhupada was staying, he had 2 rooms, but there were other rooms on the first floor of the temple. So the proprietor, Krishnadas Pandit, he would rent those rooms out to anyone, just to make money for the temple. And amongst them were these youngsters who were practicing for their band, and Prabhupada He tolerated it. Sri Krishna Pandit praised Prabhupada's work in America and his English translation of Srimad Bhagavatam. As manager of the Chippiwada Radha Krishna Temple and secretary of an active Hinduism society, Sri Krishna Pandit was interested in spreading Hindu Dharma, and therefore he wanted Prabhupada to speak at the nearby Gauri Shankar Temple, one of Delhi's most popular Hindu temples. Prabhupada agreed to go and take with him Achyutananda. Kirtananda Swami had already left for the West on August 22nd. So this Gauri Shankar temple is still present at Chandi Chowk, just on the main road. Very popular temple. And before Prabhupada left for America, he used to go there regularly and give lectures. The Gauri Shankar temple was on Chandi Chowk. After a short walk through some of the busiest, most congested streets of Old Delhi, Prabhupada and Achyutananda removed their shoes at the door and entered the temple. The main deity was Lord Shiva, but there were many others: Rama, Durga, Kali, Radha Krishna, Hanuman. The crowd stood before the elaborate altars, viewing and petitioning the various deities. So this is a quite extraordinary temple, because usually in Lord Shiva's temples, they don't have murtis or vigrahas of Lord Shiva. They just have the Shiva Ling. So the Shiva Ling is there, but on the altar, they also have, you see Lord Shiva in his leopard skin and his wife Parvati along with him. They were also worshipping vigrahas of Shankar and Parvati. Achyutananda had learned about demigod worship from Prabhupada at 26 2nd Avenue. According to Bhagavad-Gita, demigods fulfill only material desires and are therefore worshipped by the less intelligent. A Vaishnav, Prabhupada had said, respects the demigods. In fact, he respects all living beings, even the ant, but he worships only the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, or Vishnu. So because Achyutananda had been listening to Srila Prabhupada's lectures since 1966, 2 years, let's say, and Prabhupada would preach, he would speak from his Gita-upanishad, the Bhagavad-Gita, and the Srimad Bhagavatam, he already was predisposed about deity worship and demigod worship and the difference between the two. So he wondered why Prabhupada was going to give lectures at a Shiva temple. Achyutananda had already seen firsthand that impersonalists were misleading Indians to disavow the personal form of God and accept all methods of worship as equal. Most Indians had no clear understanding of Bhagavad Gita or Krishna. Achyutananda kept this in mind as Prabhupada led him in, bowing down before a few of the demigods' altars. Then Prabhupada brought him before the deity of Radha and Krishna. Just see, Prabhupada said, Krishna is just playing his flute. As for the demigods, someone is holding bows and arrows, someone is holding clubs, someone is holding weapons, but Radha and Krishna are just dancing, and Krishna is holding a flute. So he is the Supreme Lord. In one large room, a heavy-set man with a great white beard and wearing flower garlands sat on several pillows. Many people stood staring at him. He reminded Achyutananda of Santa Claus. Swamiji, who is that? Achyutananda asked. Some yogi, Prabhupada replied indifferently. The main lecture hall had a large painting of Lord Shiva on the wall and was crowded with people, women in colored saris and many of the men in bright turbans. Amid such a welter of rituals and worshippers, Achyutananda felt protected by Swamiji. They sat on the dais, and Sri Krishna Pandit introduced his friend Bhaktivedanta Swami to the crowd. Srila Prabhupada spoke in Hindi for about an hour. Walking back to Chippiwada, Achyutananda wondered why Swamiji had gone to speak at a place with such hodgepodge worship. But without his asking, it occurred to him that Swamiji was willing to speak about Krishna anywhere to anyone. Hadn't he come to New York City? And what could be more hodgepodge place than New York's Lower East Side? Sitting on the veranda outside his room, Prabhupada could see the huge domes of the Jama Mosque in the early evening sky. One evening, as Prabhupada sat softly chanting japa, and as Achyutananda, who had not yet memorized the Gayatri Mantra, sat nearby reading it to himself, a Hindu gentleman came and conversed with Prabhupada. Achyutananda soon finished the Gayatri Mantra and sat listening to his spiritual master talk in Hindi to the unknown gentleman. Achyutananda could catch only a word here or there, some mention of Ayurvedic medicine, addresses, Indian names, cities. They talked for hours, and Achyutananda wondered who this man was who could speak so long with Swamiji. When the man left, Achyutananda asked, "Swamiji, was he your god brother?" Prabhupada said, "No." "Is he a Swami?" Prabhupada said, "No." "Is he one of your relatives?" "No." "Well, who was he?" "He's my friend," Prabhupada answered emphatically. Sometimes Prabhupada's visitors would bring donations of cloth or fruits or even complete cooked meals in metal tiffins. One visitor, a middle-aged woman who had heard Prabhupada speak at the Gauri Shankar temple, came to Prabhupada's office in Chippiwada requesting initiation. Prabhupada spoke with her, agreed, and had Achyutananda prepare a small fire sacrifice. At her initiation, he gave her the name Mukunda Dasi. She came daily to clean Prabhupada's room, and when she saw that his wooden peg sandals were broken, she bought him new ones. So Achyutananda was so fortunate. You can imagine living side by side with Srila Prabhupada in his rooms there in Vrindavan, now in Delhi, seeing how Prabhupada made beautiful exchanges with his friends and now with a woman who took initiation. So this prepared Achyutananda for how he was going to live in India, because when Prabhupada went back, Achyutananda stayed here. He learned Bengali, he learned Hindi, he learned all the bhajans, and by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, he got to watch Prabhupada and see how he interacted with the Indian ladies and gentlemen who would come to see him. Chandrasekhar had known Prabhupada for several years and was supposed to have been his secretary, but he was a drunkard. Prabhupada suspected him of having stolen from his mailbox more than 2,000 rupees during the past 2 years, because Srila Prabhupada, he had been sending money to the Radha Press to print his books, and that money was all disappeared. Didn't know where it went, who took it. Prabhupada's Chippiwada address was listed in his magazines and books, and people had been sending money for books and Back to Godhead subscriptions. Even in the past 2 months, Prabhupada's disciples had written that they were enclosing money in their letters, but Prabhupada never found any. One day he caught sight of Chandrasekhar in the building and asked him, "Where is my mailbox key?" So Srila Prabhupada, he was so expert at everything. When he created the League of Devotees, he immediately got it registered at Lucknow as a charitable institution, religious, and he had membership forms for patron members, for subscription members, and he had made his address now, since he left Jhansi, at his residence at the Chippiwada temple. So all of the subscription money, all of the patron money, that was coming to the Chippiwada address, but Prabhupada never saw the money. Only the subscriptions would be there. It's just an example. This is a printout of the membership form. Dear sir, please enroll my name as constitutional member of your league, and I shall contribute my membership fee at the rate of, and then Prabhupada had different types of membership for his members to apply for. I believe you have it, Chandrasekhar replied, the key. Or maybe Sri Krishna Pandit has it. Chandrasekhar was drunk. Swamiji, Achyutananda said angrily, maybe we should make a police case. Prabhupada shook his head. No. Well, Achyutananda said, if he's not punished by the law, then in his next birth, Krishna will punish him. That's true, Prabhupada agreed. Chandrasekhar looked fearfully from Prabhupada to his American disciple. Then there's only one thing to do, Achyutananda said. Shall I call the police? No, said Prabhupada, I forgive him. Yet only a few days later, Prabhupada's record player disappeared, and Prabhupada suspected the drunkard, Chandrasekhar. Prabhupada brought Achyutananda with him to his bank, the Bank of Baroda, to exchange some American currency. As they were about to enter the door, the guard refused them entry, thinking they were sadhus come to beg. Prabhupada was angry. He spoke loudly in Hindi to the guard, an old man with a shotgun, a big strap of bullets, and a shabby semi-official uniform. I have an account here, Prabhupada protested. Finally, the guard allowed them to enter. Prabhupada went straight to the manager and complained. Do you think, Prabhupada said, because I am a sadhu, I am to regard it as a beggar? Prabhupada told the man of his organization in America and his account in the Bank of Baroda. The manager apologized and reprimanded the guard. One day, Prabhupada sent Achyutananda to a certain restaurant. If you want to see varieties of Indian food, Prabhupada said, tell the man you want 10 rupees of sweets and 10 rupees of salty preparations. That is called mithai and namkeen. And just see the varieties. Achyutananda was sick and couldn't imagine eating a lot of sweets. But he stopped by the restaurant and looked. When he returned to the temple at Chippiwada, he told Prabhupada that he had seen the food, although he couldn't eat it. Yes, but just see the varieties, Prabhupada concluded. And he explained how Krishna consciousness was personal and full of varieties, not dry. Another American disciple joined Prabhupada, Ramanuja from Haight-Ashbury. He had been initiated just before Swamiji had left San Francisco, and he sported a full black beard. Prabhupada didn't like the beard. Cautiously and indirectly, he mentioned it, but Ramanuja's beard stayed. Ramanuja carried a book about Tibetan Buddhism, and he didn't seem fixed in Krishna consciousness philosophy. But here he was, one of the loser, sentimental San Francisco devotees, ready for Indian adventures with Swamiji. Srila Prabhupada visited the wealthy Delhi industrialist Mr. Seth Dalmia to discuss plans for printing some of his books in India. Mr. Dalmia received him well, but gave only vague promises of help. Prabhupada also met with Hidcharan Sharma, Mr. Dalmia's secretary, who worked closely with Hanuman Prasad Podar of the popular religious publishing company Gita Press. Srila Prabhupada was already acquainted with all three gentlemen, since they had all donated toward his first volume of Srimad Bhagavatam. So later, in 1970, 71, Srila Prabhupada, as he was touring India with his World Sankirtan Party, he made a visit to Gorakhpur, where Hanuman Prasad Podar has the Gita Press. And Hanuman Prasad Podar, he very hospitably gave accommodation for Prabhupada and all of his disciples there, and they had very nice talks together, because they were trying to do the same thing. They were trying to preach the teachings of Bhagavad-Gita. Most of the Gita Press publications are in Hindi, but they also try to print in English. These are some of their publications. Prabhupada wanted Gita Press to publish his Gita Upanishad and Srimad Bhagavatam. Charan Sharma showed him an illustrated Gita in Hindi poetry that he had recently published. But my Gita, my Bhagavatam, said Srila Prabhupada, appearing disgusted, is the description of God. It is a description of Krishna. Mr. Sharma said he couldn't see how Gita Press could print Prabhupada's voluminous writings. Nevertheless, Prabhupada still considered privately printing Gita Upanishad with Mr. Sharma as his agent. So even if Gita Press wasn't going to print Prabhupada's things, Prabhupada was willing, he felt that he was capable of privately publishing his books. He estimated that the Srimad Bhagavatam would be 60 volumes long. On October 11th, Prabhupada wrote to Brahmananda, "We must have our books printed. We have wasted much time in the matter of editing and finding out a suitable publisher. When I was alone, there was 3 volumes published, but during the last 2 years, I could not publish a single volume more. It is a great defeat. If I have 1 or 2 sincere souls like you, and if we can make more publications, then our mission will be a great success. I am prepared to sit down underneath a tree with 1 sincere soul, and in such activity, I shall be freed of all diseases." So we can remember that when Prabhupada was at the Bowery, 26 2nd Avenue, Stinson Beach, Prabhupada was always dictating. And his dictations were being sent to Satsrup in New York. Satsrup was transcribing, and there were stacks and stacks and stacks of papers already ready for publication. But so far, Prabhupada could not find a publisher. Devotees from America were regularly writing Swamiji, anxious to see him again in good health. But he didn't want to leave India, he explained, until he personally saw that the printing of his Gita Upanishad was underway. Printing Gita Upanishad and obtaining approval for permanent residency in the U.S. were the 2 short-term goals he wished to achieve before returning. But he thought often of his return to America. As you are all feeling my separation, similarly, I'm also anxious to return as soon as possible. I think I'm fit to go back to your country at present, and as scheduled previously, I'm sure by the end of October. I must be fit to return, but before this, there are many things to be done. I'm not yet assured of the permanent visa. Now, Prabhupada says permanent visa in present-day nomenclature. That means a green card, where he would be able to get an immigration visa, and he would be able to stay in America, get a green card that's residency, and eventually, if he cared to, get citizenship in America. But that's way down the line. At this point, he just needed to get a visa, a proper immigration visa, to go back to America, because he already found out that if you go on a tourist visa, you can extend 1 month, another month, and Prabhupada was there for 2 years on a tourist visa, but then they wouldn't extend it anymore. The best thing will be that from each temple an invitation should be sent that my presence is urgently required. Presently, I'm very much anxious to begin printing here if Macmillan Company does not take up the work. Please, therefore, let me know yes or no from Macmillan. If he is not serious, then immediately send the manuscripts, finished or not, to the following address. Pandit Hicharan Sharma, care of Dalmia Enterprises, Scindia House, New Delhi. After dispatching, let me know, and I shall do the needful. So eventually, in 1968, Macmillan printed a highly abridged version of Srila Prabhupada's Gita Upanishad. This is the cover of that book, and we had that until finally, which year? 1972, they printed the entire version of Srimad Bhagavad-Gita with the Sanskrit, the transliteration, word for word, and purports. But until that time, we had this abridged version. Indian friends who visited Prabhupada's room listened eagerly as he told them about America, the millions of cars and the superhighways, and thousands of young people rejecting their father's wealth. But Prabhupada's visitors weren't fully able to understand his visit to America. Not that they were too simple to understand, and not just that they had never traveled in the West. Prabhupada's experience in America consisted of intimate spiritual relationships with his disciples. How could an outsider understand the dynamics of his temples and his disciples in the West? How could anyone except Prabhupada and his disciples understand these things? So we heard last week that even the residents of Vrindavan, who were all devotees of Krishna, they appreciated Srila Prabhupada very much, but they were quite wary of his disciples. They weren't sure yet whether they were Vaishnavas or just what they were, hippies. So Prabhupada understood that these Vaishnavas, these followers of Bhagavad-Gita, they accepted him, but they weren't ready yet to accept his disciples as Vaishnavas. My mind is always with you. Practically, your country is my home now. India is a foreign country for me. The reason is that my spiritual family is there, and my material relationships are in India. Therefore, factually, where my spiritual family exists, there is my home. So this is a group picture that Srila Prabhupada took with his disciples in San Francisco. You can recognize some of them. There's Jamuna, there's Govinda Dasi and Gaur Sundar, there's Lilavati, Upendra, Malati, Krishna Das, Subal. So we had heard about all these wonderful devotees of Srila Prabhupada, and before Prabhupada left San Francisco, they had this very nice photo taken. Srila Prabhupada's vision of a worldwide society of devotees preaching in temples and publishing books, a vision he had had even before he had gone to America, was now becoming manifest. But it was dependent on him. In his absence, his disciples were sustained only by carrying out his orders and receiving his letters. When Dayananda and Nandarani had gone from San Francisco Temple to start a temple in Los Angeles, it had been Swamiji's instructions that had sustained and guided them. Wherever there is a new branch of our society for Krishna consciousness, I become very, very happy, and my blessings in heart and soul are with you. So Srila Prabhupada, he would write very, very long letters to his disciples who were pioneering, going out and starting new temples. A temple in New York, and then in August 1967, Satsvarup and Rai Ram went to Boston. Janananda, Kirtanananda, and Hansaduta had already gone to Montreal, San Francisco, and now Prabhupada wanted a temple in Los Angeles. So he wrote so many wonderful letters to them. They're all in the archives if you'd like to read them. Just letters to direct them how they should preach, because Los Angeles was quite different from San Francisco. San Francisco was the hub of the counterculture, the hippie culture. And Los Angeles was a different type of atmosphere. So they had to adjust their preaching accordingly. And Prabhupada was directing them all by letter. On receipt of Swamiji's letter, they knew they had done the right thing. No matter that husband and wife sometimes quarreled and that there wasn't enough money, the main thing was that Swamiji was pleased. So I'll just take a little excerpt from one of the letters. I understand from your letter that the situation in Los Angeles is different from San Francisco or New York in the matter of communications. But the flavor of Krishna consciousness is so far-reaching that it will go far and wide if we chant with devotion. After all, Krishna is the master of all situations. In the beginning, you may feel some difficulty, but rest assured that Krishna is always with you and he will help you in all respects. Now, this is a very nice part, because when Prabhupada came back, eventually he went to Los Angeles and he stayed there, and it was there that Prabhupada dictated the entire Krishna book. So he stayed there for a long time. I've heard from friends that the climate of Los Angeles is warmer. For my health, I require warmer climate. Whatever improvement is made here in the matter of my health, it is all due to warm climate. As such, I shall be pleased to know about Los Angeles with special reference to its climatic conditions. So this is why eventually Prabhupada made Los Angeles his world headquarters. From Boston, Satsvarup wrote that he and the other devotees there were moving from an apartment to a rented storefront near Boston University. When he entered the storefront for the first time as the new tenant, he found on the floor an aerogram from Swamiji, dated October 6th, from Delhi. So now we have, of course, Prabhupada gave instructions how they should preach to the college students, because Boston is a big college town. A lot of very, very big and prominent colleges and universities there. But Kirtananda by this time had returned to America, and he was not following Prabhupada's directions. So I've taken a little excerpt out. Kirtananda may be eager to address in the Harvard University, but recently he has lost his link on account of disobedience. You sing every day, morning, that by the mercy of the spiritual master one can please the Lord, and one who has not pleased the spiritual master cannot have any access in the realm of Krishna consciousness. Very recently, Kirtananda has developed a different consciousness of Maya, which is called misuse of one's minute independence offered by Krishna. By misuse of one's independence, one at once becomes a victim of Maya, and thus he loses all importance in Krishna consciousness. So it is my definite opinion that his lecture anywhere now will bear no spiritual sequence. He must rectify his mistake before he can play in our society any important role. By lips he says that he is a surrendered soul, but by action he is thinking differently. So here's Prabhupada on the other side of the world, and he already is able to detect that one of his first disciples, first sannyas in the movement, has now deviated from Prabhupada's teachings. I can understand that you have secured a very nice place in Boston, and there is a very good possibility of pushing our movement amongst the student community there. Our movement is certainly very much appealing to the younger section of your country, and if we are successful in the matter of attracting the student community in your country, certainly this movement will scatter all over the world, and fulfill the foretelling of Lord Chaitanya that in every village and every town of the world, the Lord will be famous for his glorious Sankirtan movement. Please try for this with your heart and soul, and your life will be a successful mission. So this is just where the devotees got their temple. This is the Boston University. So they got their temple just near the campus. And their preaching was very, very successful there. My younger sister went to Boston University, and whenever she could, she would come to New York and help me distribute books, because the devotees were having a very nice influence on the young people in Boston at that time. This is the Sankirtan in Boston. You can see Boston Common there. Big, just like in New York, they have Central Park. So they have the Boston Commons in Boston where people like to gather. So they would have Sankirtan there every day. The letter was as good as Swamiji coming personally to open the storefront and begin the preaching. He gave Satsuru full direction and inspiration, and it was personal. In that same letter, Prabhupada had written, I am always aspiring after returning to your care and overload you with typewriting tasks. I hope we shall very soon meet again and help each other in the matter of discharging Krishna-conscious engagements. I am now 90% all right, and I think I can return safely. This typewriting work is done by me. For 2 days I am alone and doing everything myself as experiment. This proves that I am now well. Please offer my blessings to all the boys and girls there. In New Mexico, Subal was trying to arrange public speaking engagements for Prabhupada's return, and Prabhupada was encouraging him. If you think I can be on television by the first week in December, then you can arrange for it, because I must be in your country by the middle of November. Now, here's an excerpt. You remember Subal was a very enthusiastic devotee. He used to dance wildly in the temple and on Sankirtan. And he came along with, he married his partner, Krishna Daivi, Subal and Krishna Daivi. So they went to New Mexico, Santa Fe, and opened a temple there. This is an excerpt from that letter that Prabhupada wrote to him. Please accept my blessings. I am very glad to understand that your service attitude for propagation of Krishna consciousness is progressively increasing. Krishna consciousness is such a nice thing that the more you work for the cause, the more you become enthusiastic to execute the purpose. Your wife is always assisting you, so why make her unhappy by uttering something which is unnecessary and unpleasant? Even if you accept Vanaprast, there is no restriction for keeping one's wife in company. Only a sannyasi cannot have any connection with woman, just as a brahmachari. In my opinion, your wife and yourself are nicely executing my mission, and please try to follow my instructions, and you shall never be unhappy. So, unfortunately, Subal's wife left him at this time, and another initiated devotee named Dinesh, they left together, and they left Subal there alone, and they went to Israel. Krishna Devi and Dinesh, they went to Israel, and they opened a temple there in Tel Aviv, and had a child there. So Prabhupada is trying to request his disciple before Krishna Devi left him that, now that Prabhupada had introduced sannyas, so sometimes when the devotees hear that this person, now I want to take sannyas too, I don't want the responsibility of grihastha life. But Prabhupada was encouraging Subal that, no, you stay with your wife, she's a very nice devotee, and together, even if you take Vanaprast, you can still live together and serve together. Srila Prabhupada wrote to Janardhan in Montreal, answering his philosophical doubts and encouraging him to be patient with his spiritually reluctant wife. And to Rai Ram, who was editing Back to Godhead magazine in New York, he gave another kind of thoughtful assurance. I am very happy that since it, Back to Godhead, is entrusted to you, the things are improving. This means that Krishna is giving you more and more facilities. Krishna is such a nice boss that he gives more facilities and improvement to the sincere servant. Now, these philosophical doubts, they were coming from a source, because Prabhupada's teachings are crystal clear. There's no doubts in those. But since Kirtananda came back, he was creating dissension. So I took another excerpt from one of the letters that Prabhupada wrote to Janardhan. No, this letter was written to Kirtananda directly. Since you have returned to New York, you have falsely dictated that I do not want the robes or flags. Flags means Sika. Why are you disturbing the whole situation in my absence? I never ordered you to speak like that. They must continue to have robes and tilak and flags, and they must distinguish themselves from the hippies. I never objected to any of my students dressing like nice American gentlemen, clean-shaved. Those who are my disciples must have flag, tilak, and beads on neck without fail. Anyway, I never advise you to dictate on behalf. Please, therefore, do not misrepresent me. If you do not agree with my philosophy, you can work independent and not within the walls of ISKCON. You have not understood Krishna properly. The best thing will be to stop your talks, my return until... And if you love me at all, please do not talk in any meeting, but chant in solitary place, anywhere you like. Hope you are well. So Prabhupada was quite heavy with Kirtananda because he was creating confusion amongst the devotees since he returned from India. On October 9th, the day Prabhupada started for Calcutta, he left behind a different kind of letter for Sri Krishna Pandit. Prabhupada had been negotiating with Sri Krishna Pandit to purchase the Chippiwada temple for ISKCON, or at least to rent a single room through a formal contract. Prabhupada wanted the room as a Delhi headquarters for printing his books. On the day of his departure, however, Sri Krishna Pandit was unavailable, and Prabhupada left him a short handwritten note. So Sri Krishna Pandit had intentionally avoided when Prabhupada left. So therefore Prabhupada had to give different ideas to Sri Krishna Pandit of whether they could negotiate the room to become Prabhupada's permanent office. Now we're going on to the last chapter of the third volume. It's called India Revisited Part 2, because now Prabhupada will have left Vrindavan, left Delhi, and returned to Calcutta for the first time. Prabhupada's train, the Kalka Mail, pulled into Delhi station. Prabhupada and his two disciples had tickets with reserved seat numbers, but no car number. So while Prabhupada waited with the baggage, Achyutananda and Ramanuja ran from one end of the train to the other, looking for their car. After they had found their seats and boarded, Achyutananda untied Prabhupada's bedding and spread it open on the upper tier. Prabhupada climbed the little ladder and sat comfortably on his cotton stuffed quilt and opened his Sanskrit Srimad Bhagavatam, while Achyutananda and Ramanuja took their seats. It would take around 24 hours to reach Calcutta. Near the end of the journey, a group of educated Bengali gentlemen struck up a philosophical conversation with the Swami. "We do not worship any form," said one, speaking fluent English in a loud, deep voice. "We have a marble Omkara that we worship, and we sit and pray to that." "That is also form," said Prabhupada. He was reluctant to attack their philosophical position directly. We practice karma yoga, the gentleman went on, not heeding Prabhupada's previous point, because in karma yoga, you can stay within your position. But karma yoga is not full surrender of the soul, said Prabhupada. One must come to the stage of bhakti. Oh no, the man protested. Emotionalism is very harmful. Karma yoga, Srila Prabhupada exploded. Karma yoga is for the fools. Silence. Another man, not with the Bengalis, but seated beside them, spoke up. Obviously, Swamiji is a learned scholar, he said. You shouldn't argue like that. The Bengali that Prabhupada had shouted at got up and moved to another seat. Later, he came back. Are you insulted? Prabhupada asked him. No, 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 he replied, but I have never heard anyone say that about the teachings of the Gita. The Bengalis then talked with Achyutananda, lighting their cigarettes and smoking freely before him, although they had not dared to do so before Prabhupada. It wasn't proper to smoke in front of a sadhu. Bengalis, Achyutananda told them, citing one of Prabhupada's examples, were very sorry that East Pakistan had been cut off from the rest of Bengal. But Krishna consciousness could elevate people to international, universal consciousness. Then there wouldn't be any such division. The Bengalis appreciated Achyutananda's remark, though they continued to blow smoke in his face as the train rattled over the last miles to Calcutta. Prabhupada was greeted at Calcutta's Howrah station by relatives, mostly from his sister's family, and by devotees of Sammat. About 50 people were on hand. They offered Prabhupada flower garlands and sandalwood paste, and then escorted him and his disciples into a car. Achyutananda and Ramanuja noticed that although Swamiji's sister was shorter and more rotund than Prabhupada, her facial features were strikingly similar. Her name was Baba Tarini, but Prabhupada told them to call her Pishima, aunt. So Pishima means the father's sister. Pishima was initiated Harinam Diksha by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, but because she lived with her husband, Rasa Bihari, they had 9 children. He was non-vegetarian, so Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati did not give her Gayatri mantra. Later, after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati left this world, she and her husband also died. She took second initiation from Prabhupada's godbrother, Bhakti Saranga Goswami, who oversees the Imlitala temple here in Vrindavan. As Prabhupada rode through the streets, he saw many images of Goddess Kali, 10-armed, riding a lion. Calcutta was observing this month the 2 biggest religious celebrations in Bengal, Durga Puja and Kali Puja, festivities in honor of the goddess Durga or Kali. Throughout the city, brass bands and radio music blared, and there were decorative lights, stages, and tents. So Satsuru Maharaj doesn't go into much detail about the Durga Puja and Kali Puja, but Achyutananda, who was with Prabhupada, he decided to see what was going on in all of these pandals, and he gives a very vivid description of trying to get to the pandals, but there was blood from the sacrifices all around the pandals, so they couldn't even reach the pandal. So anyone who's been in Bengal at that time, they know that they have huge pandals to worship Kali and Durga at that time. And the people are very fervently offering sacrifices, unfortunately, non-vegetarian sacrifices to the deity. When Prabhupada arrived at Pishima's house in South Calcutta, his relatives seated him and performed an arti ceremony in his honor, reverently offering him the traditional items, incense, a flaming lamp, flowers. They also bathed his feet. He sat smiling within the crowded room of relatives who were proud of his having journeyed to America on behalf of Lord Krishna. So some of us were fortunate enough. Here's Narayani, Mataji. I don't know whether Pancharatna ever went to Pishima's house, but we got to go to Pishima's house. And what an experience. Because she had so many children and it was a Hindu united family, each one of her sons had a room. And each one of her sons lived in their room with their family, their wife and their children. And everything was in one big house. When you entered, you had Pishima's room just on the side. And then when you went upstairs, that was the temple room. And that was where Prabhupada had given his original Radha Govinda deities that his father had given him to Pishima. And she was worshiping the Radha Govinda deities up in that room. And Pishima would cook, when we would go there to take prasadam, she would sit you down and you wouldn't, by the time she was finished feeding us, you couldn't get up. Yes?
Yeah, I remember I went there and everything was cooked in mustard,
yes.
which I didn't like.
Right.
So finally she gave me some rice. And I said, oh, rice. And she took a bottle of mustard out and poured it all over. But I survived this.
So when you finished taking prasadam, because she made so many preparations every time you would go there, you would actually have to go lie down because you couldn't move. You have to go lie down on her bed anywhere you could because you had to wait until you digested, because mustard oil is so difficult to digest for people like us. They can't live without mustard oil, and we can't. Even Prabhupada, he couldn't take mustard oil. And when she would hide the mustard oil so that we couldn't see her putting it in. But sometimes he would just get angry. And he would see that she had cooked a big thing, and he would tell me, put it there, because he knew he couldn't eat it because of the mustard oil. But she was such a wonderful, wonderful cook. And her family members, they were so devoted to Prabhupada and to her, and they loved Prabhupada. He was like the hero of their family. So I think we have, yes, just an example of the feast. As Prabhupada's family members sang Hare Krishna Kirtan, from outside the room, the ladies of the house began singing a high, shrill, whooping sound. Anyone know how to do that? Go on. Yeah, there you go. Achyutananda and Ramanuja were startled. Pishima had prepared a large feast, much of it cooked in mustard seed oil, for the homecoming celebration. And Prabhupada satisfied her by honoring the prasadam, even though he wasn't feeling well and was tired from the train ride. So here we are now, Prabhupada's back home in Calcutta, and there'll be many more adventures after this, but time is way past. So we'll continue next week. Hare Krishna. Jai.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.